This poker strategy is so profitable, it should be illegal. And I'm gonna show you how to use it. This helped me earn over 7 figures playing, and to prove it's not a fluke, I'm gonna bring in 3 high stakes pros who also swear by this strategy. We've got Yolan, Darius, and Gethen. Let's meet the players. We will start with Yolan.
Hi guys, my name is Yolan. I'm mainly a high stakes live players right now, and I'm playing between 25-50 and sometimes some higher stakes like 125, 250, 500. And last year I made over $400,000 playing live poker.
All right, next up we've got Darius.
Yeah, I'm Darius, Iki Poker. I've won over $500,000 playing cash games in my life. Made $1 a hand playing Ignition a couple years back through COVID. Yeah, now playing 25-50 and 50-100 live in Sydney.
Last but not least, we've got Gethen, not only a poker crusher, but one of the best synchronized rugby players in the entire world.
Hi, I'm Gethen. I'm the co-founder of Hungry Horse. I've been a professional poker player for more than a decade. I've played high stakes online up to 25-50 NL, and I have played up to 400, 800 with some $1,600 straddles in live poker and made 500K plus for many years of both live and online play.
So I'm going to have all of these wizards play a few hands. But there's a catch. I'm going to have them play each hand twice. First, when they have value, and next, when they have a bluff. Just how balanced are these high-stakes super pros going to be? I have a feeling you're going to be surprised. Let's jump in. All right, so every hand we're gonna be playing 10-20, 4K effective, so 200 big blinds. And unless otherwise noted, the villain in every hand is going to be a trying recreational player. So not really a fish, not really a pro, someone who is trying to win, maybe a break-even player or a small winner, going to be kind of a common archetype in live poker at these stakes. Very first hand here, we are on the button with pocket fives. We're gonna open it up to $60, and the big blind, a trying rec, is going to call. Flop comes 10-8-5, so we flop bottom set. He checks it over to us. Walk me through what you are thinking here on this flop.
So I think with pocket 5 roll, we have obviously a very strong hand on this board. We'll want to choose a bigger size, and against a trying recreational player, that will also be, I think, the best size. We just want to build a bot here, and we will have a lot of draws in our perceived region later to make big size and get called by weaker hands. So I think here with 5s, I'll bet 150 here.
So we go 150 and opponent calls. We're going to a turn, which is an offsuit 3, and now the opponent checks.
I think here I will go really big. In general, people don't really like to fold top pair on the turn, so I think I will go somewhere around 1,100. So I can have like close to a pot size bet on the river, and that's why I want to size really big, because I think the main calling region will be a 10 or combo draws, and I don't think this hand's fold against a very big sizing.
So we go 1.1K, he calls. Now the river is an offsuit ace, and he checks it over. So give me your thoughts and your decision on this river.
I think the river is a bit complicated. I clearly see 2 options here. I see the smaller size option to target a 10, so betting around 900. I can also see the bigger sizing here, like all-in, simply to get called by 2 plus. 10 ain't often gonna raise the flop. He might have some like ace 8, ace 10, but I think the number of 10x here is higher, way higher than the number of 2 pairs. So I will just tend to size down here and bet 900 to get called by a 10.
Okay, so 900. All right, same exact spot, except now we have 7-6 of spades on the button. Same flop here. Walk me through your thoughts.
I will tend in live games to play this type of bluff in the checking line, simply because you gain EV by having hands in lines that people don't really see you on. And here with 7-6, we will realize we could see quite well in the checking line, because we can call a bet all the time on the turn. Recreational players don't use overbets enough on the turn, and my hand can play well as a call on the turn, raise on the river, depending on the size. So I think I'm gonna have more clairvoyance when I check the turn, and I will be able to make a better bluff when I check the flop.
The turn is an offsuit 3, and now the villain comes out and bets 100 here on this turn.
Pretty clear call. I think this sizing represents mostly a 10. I still expect 2 pair plus to bet a bigger size, but I think I'm gonna have more clairvoyance by calling here, and depending on the river size, I can raise my hand or simply fold my hands and facing check here. I will bet on the river.
River is an offsuit ace, and now our opponent takes a second and then he checks.
We are not going to see traps super often, so we need to be not scared about that. I will just try to target a 10 and make fold a 10 all the time. So I'm probably gonna size like 960 actually.
All right, now I'm just curious. I'm gonna give you a third hand here actually. Now we have ace deuce of clubs in the exact same spot. Flop comes the same. Once again, walk me through your thoughts here throughout this hand.
I think I also prefer to check, to be honest. It's a board where when we bet on the flop, we will have a lot of full equity, mostly on turns and rivers. So we can apply, in this case, a lot of pressure to a cap range. However, I think when you check here, people will see you less on flushes, and it's easier for him to call the raising on the turn or to call the raise on the river, or both, simply because I expect my range to have way too much ace clubs X in a bluff. And so I expect him to probably call a little bit more than what he should in his spots. And I don't think when I bet the flop and the clubs came in, people tend to overcall these spots.
And the turn is a 3. Our opponent comes out and bets 100.
Okay, I think here we can just call. We will have a lot of clearance on what to do on the river. So I don't think I want to raise. And also the reason why I'm playing check on the flop is because I believe on this board when I check, my opponent will give me more information and I will take decisions that are more clairvoyant. And this will lead towards a higher EV decision. So I'm just gonna call here even if I consider raising possible.
We are going to call. We get to the river in the same way here, and the river is an ace, giving us top pair, and now our opponent checks.
Not something I say too much, but my sizing will depend on his timing, because someone who snap check is not the same as someone who think a lot and check, because it means two different range super often, and people are really honest with the timing in a live environment. Let's say I don't have any information, or his
Let's go
sizing...
through both, actually. I find that interesting. Let's go through first
Sure.
if he snap checks, and then if he takes a little time and
So
checks.
if he snap checks, I will assume he has close to 0 trap. So I will just eliminate ace 8, ace 5, ace 3 from his range. And when he tanks a lot, I will assume he has way more either give ups or hand that are close to that. When he snap check, I will assume his range should be quite 10x / weak oriented. And I will just bet a smaller size here to get sure I'm getting called. And here it's very important to make a size where the opponent is gonna think you can have value cuts. If he doesn't tank too long, I'll tend to bet around 120, 140 to get called by a 10. And if he tanks a lot, I think his range is a bit more polarized. I think when he tank check, he's gonna be a bit more oriented toward the stronger region of the probing range on the turn. So I will tend to size up a little bit compared to when he snap check, where I think his range will consist more of hands that are an easy check here.
So if he does snap check, you're going 120?
Yes, and if he tank check, I go 150 here, 160.
All right, so first hand, Yolan, obviously not balanced, playing bluffs and value wildly differently. I thought this river decision with the pocket fives was super interesting because there's two portions of villain's range we could target. Yolan elected to go 900 here, trying to keep in the king 10, queen 10, jack 10, 10, 9 type stuff. I think the other option here on this river, which he talked about, is just jamming all in, targeting all of the ace 10, ace 8 of clubs, ace 3 of clubs, maybe even sticky ace X of clubs that may not fold to a river jam here when the SPR is 1. But either way, thought this was a pretty interesting spot. Also thought Yolan took a super interesting line with this 7-6 where he elected to check back the flop, call the turn, and then 3x pot the river. I think this is pretty creative, and I think it's a pretty cool line. My default in this spot would probably just be to c-bet on the flop, bet big on the turn, and then when the river's an ace here, I'm just trying to get hands like 10x to fold that are going to shrink up in value here. So on this river, my value size would either be very, very big, like 2x pot to target the ace 10, ace 8 of clubs, ace 3 of clubs, or my value size would be very, very small here to target like king 10, queen 10, jack 10, etc. So I think going somewhere in between just to try to get the 10x to fold and to make sure we lose the minimum against the 2-pair portion of the range is somewhat interesting. So I'd probably go somewhere around the 1,000 vicinity on this river. So I would have played it slightly differently than Yolan, but I thought he had a super interesting and creative line here. All right, so we're on the button with ace jack of spades, going to open it up to 60, and the villain, a try and wreck in the big blind, is going to call. Flop comes queen 7-4 with a couple spades, so we flop the nut flush draw. Walk me through what you're thinking here, starting from the flop.
So mostly just range betting this flop functions really well and keeping my options open on turn and river. Bet 40 here.
He is going to call. We go to a turn, which is a deuce of spades. He checks it over, and at this point, we have the nuts. What are you thinking here on the turn now?
I'm looking to get the max from top pair, looking to get the max from lower flushes, so just going to be betting a size that targets those hands. I don't think on a flush close turn, queen X is going to really raise for me very often, so I just bet 3/4, 150.
Got it. So we go 150. They call. Now the river is an offsuit 9, and he checks it over.
And now just going the bigger size, I think top pair is going to call. Something like king, queen, king, jack, betting 400 here.
We want top pair to never fold on this river.
Yes, yeah.
All right, this time same spot, except we've got 6-5 of diamonds this time. So we flop an open-ended straight draw. Walk me through what you're thinking here, starting from the flop. Are you doing anything different here on the flop, or you're just kind of simplifying and range betting?
Yeah, simplifying this flop especially. 40 functions pretty well, I think.
Cool. So So villain's gonna call, we go to a turn. Same turn, deuce of spades, and we still just have 6 high here, and now villain checks it over.
Now, tons of merit to down betting. They are going to raise their flushes, they're going to raise a lot of their strong hands. So if we go small and they call, they aren't really going to have flushes on the river. And then hands like Queen X, regardless of the turn size, regardless of the line, I think we're just still going to be able to target on the river moving forward. Go small, define their range, and go from there. I'm happier value betting, triple barreling this hand if we do hit straight on the river after we down bet and define their range in that way. So it functions especially well with 6-5.
So size on the turn here?
So going 1/3, like 70.
So we go 70, he calls, river now a 9, and he checks it over to us one more time.
They called, they're capped. I think they mostly have like top pair as sort of the top of range unless they've randomly binked 2-pair. So just going a size that I think they're going to fold the majority of the time and going 550, big overbet.
Notice again, Darius playing his bluffs and his value completely differently. The one thing I may quibble with, if I'm going to get a little bit nitpicky here, is when we do have the ace jack of spades, I might go a little bit smaller on the turn because I think if we start going 150, villains will slow play with hands like jack high, 10 high, 9 high flushes here on the turn if we go too big. Not because they're trying to trap us or something. It's just because they get a little bit scared that we have a higher flush. Live players are going to be a little bit too passive. They're going to go into kind of this check call shell. So if they have a smaller flush and we bet 150 here, they may just call, and then we're going to get to the river. We're going to think, oh, you know what? They don't have many flushes because they didn't raise a turn, and we just don't get max value. The cool part about betting like 35-40% pot on this turn is when villain has a flush, they will almost always raise, and then if they don't raise, we know we're just targeting like top pair hands on the river. So it gives us a little bit more information. They put in more money for us. We still get to cooler their flushes. So I may just go slightly smaller on this turn. And you heard Darius even say when he had 6-5 of diamonds here, he went small on the turn to make sure villain would raise off their flushes. I think that's also good when we have the nut flush ourselves. All right, this hand here we open in the cutoff to 60. Button's gonna 3-bet to 200. We are calling 9-6-4 with a couple of diamonds. We check it over, and button actually checks back. We go to a turn, which is the king of clubs. Walk me through what you're thinking from this point forward. Let's hear it.
So as soon as the flop goes check, I think a trying wreck in this spot, particularly on a board like 9-6-4, they're just gonna have a lot of like strong ace highs. They're gonna probably be under 3-betting pre-flop, can be a lot of ace king, and I would expect that a lot of hands like aces, kings, queens, jacks, very high frequency bet on the flop. I'm going to check here to evaluate their sizing. I think I'm planning on trying to maximize fold equity with a check raise. A 4K effect, I've got plenty of money to work with. I think I'm checking here, evaluating their bet size, looking to check raise, start to really put a lot of pressure on one pair hands.
So we check, and he goes 300 here on this turn.
Not my favorite size. I think we were expecting a fairly chunky bet here. The really important question here is just SPR management. Just making sure that if we are going to pull the trigger here, that we don't back ourselves into a corner on the river in terms of if we check raise to say 1500 here, well, now the pot's going to be 3500 and we're just not probably going to have a big enough bet back here. And they're probably going to check raise to about 1000 here, I think, which should give me a pretty large bet left on the river. I think that's going to allow me to target one pair hands while maximizing fold equity, still giving me the option if I do hit my hand on the river to size down to target hands like ace king.
He is going to call. The river is in offsuit 3.
Look at that.
And we have
sweet baby there. I believe we almost have a straight. We have 4 cards to a straight. I think that's worth 3/4 of the pot. Obviously we have no showdown here. I think we are facing a range that's going to be primarily ace king. There might be a little bit of aces in range. I have seen that hand check back. I think if we've sculpted the pot appropriately, there aren't really many other options to consider besides all in. It feels like I've set up pretty reasonable SPR here. I think trying Rex are some of the best players to bluff. I think those are the players who are under bluffing themselves, often put their assumptions on other people. I think I'm putting the money in.
All right, same exact spot, except we have pocket 6s and we flop middle set here. So once again, flop goes check. We are starting from the turn, which is an offsuit king. Walk me through your thoughts.
Well, I think their range is of course still the same. I think we're talking about a lot of ace king, perhaps a little bit of ace queen. I'm a little concerned at this SPR that a check raise is going to generate perhaps too much fold equity if I check raise and then try and put all the money in on the river. I'm a little torn here. I think the 2 options that I would be immediately considering would be large overbet and then follow that up with a big bet on the river, or I would be considering check raise, probably slightly larger, trying to drag that SPR ideally under 1, and then either consider sizing down if I think I'm playing against a player who is perhaps perhaps slightly more risk averse and overfolding. And if I think I can be extra greedy, slightly larger turn check raise, try and play for all the money on the river. Debating between those two without any clear reads. I think most of the time when I'm playing against trying wrecks, I try and put the money in for them. I think I'd be going with the overbet. I think something around 1,000. And on the river, don't think after just leading turn, the draw bricking on the river, that I would feel particularly comfortable trying to make them fold a hand like ace king. Taking this line that I think reduces fold equity, I'm probably just putting the money in.
Well, what do you know? Gethen took the exact same line I would take here, playing the jack 10 here on the king x turn as a check raise, going for that max fold equity. Just figuring villain's going to be very, very ace king heavy here on this turn. And if they do have a hand like ace queen, they're probably going to stab here, so they'll put in more money for us and we can always get them to fold. The best way to get villain to fold a hand like ace king here is to go for the check raise in the jam river. This maximizes fold equity. Now with pocket sixes, Gethen taking my preferred line and just going with the big overbet. Ace king's just never folding. Sure, we lose a bit of value from ace queen that may just stab here, but I think this just maximizes value against villain's range, where they're just going to have so much ace king here that's never going to fold if we just take the lead ourselves. Remember, leading minimizes fold equity, check raising maximizes fold equity, even if a similar amount of money is going into the pot. All right, next spot here, we're going to open 8-7 of spades in the cutoff. The button, once again, trying recreational player, is going to 3-bet us to 200. We're going to call, and flop comes 10-9 deuce with a couple of hearts, so we flop open-ended here. We check it over to the villain, and he is actually going to check back. We go to a turn now, which is an ace. Let's start playing the hand from here. Walk me through your thoughts from this spot going forward.
What I want to do here is bet extremely small, so I can get called by hands that will call on the turn and fold later, like pocket 8, king 9, king jack, king 10. And when he's gonna raise, I know that aces and ace 10 is not often in this range, so I will get raised by the weaker region, so I can free bet again this range, or like call lead basically. I can play two lines, so I can target this region that seems strong but is actually not facing bet small free bet here. So I will go more for 100, and if you raise, I will free bet the turn here.
So we go 100 here on the turn, and he raises to 400. Tell me what you're thinking.
It's very difficult to know the best line between free bet the turn and call the turn plus lead. There's a lot of rivers we can lead. I can lead for a value bet on a 6 or on a jack. On a heart, I can bluff. He's not gonna have any 10 play this way, so on a 10, for example, I can just like donk for a very big size. And I think here I will actually go for the free bet. The problem with the free bet size is if you go too big, it's gonna be very difficult to know what he's doing with ace queen, ace jack, ace king, because a lot of players are gonna fold the turn. So what they call on the turn is actually very strong, and you're just going to isolate yourself against hands that will basically just put the chips in the middle as soon as you bet on the river. I think here is a free bet. I will go around probably 900 to get sure to get called, and I will just jam actually most rivers. I will jam on the queen, I will jack on the 10, I will not jam the king, I will not jam the ace, I will jam every hearts combo that he might have, because I think flush draws are going to bet too much, and I'm going to jam basically every blanks here to target ace king specifically. And when you raise a smaller size, what's going to happen is when he's gonna have like very strong hand, for example, like let's say he check back pocket 10s or pocket aces, he's just going to re-raise, so you delete his hands from his range.
This is a really cool line. I didn't even think about this. This is really cool. He is going to call. River is an offsuit 3.
So I'm jamming here. I think we're gonna max pressure ace king, ace queen, and as I said, I don't think most like sets and two pair are going to be in this line, so yeah, I will just go all in here and max pressure ace king, ace queen.
All right, now let's say the river is a 6 and we actually get there on the river. How are you thinking about playing this spot now on the river after 3 betting on the turn?
If we're very big luck box on the rivers, and I will tend to size down here simply because when I choose the all-in, I expect him to overfold compared to what he should call. So it makes no sense to play bluff the same way. I will go for 800, and to be sure, I'm getting called by an ace.
800.
Yeah.
All right, now same spot, except we're going to have pocket 9s. Once again, we open the button 3 bets. We are going to call. We're going to check on the flop. He checks it back. Turn is now an ace. Walk me through what you're thinking from this decision point going forward.
I'll bet 100 also.
So you go 100. Villain raises to 400. And what are you thinking here after he raises?
I think I just raised 900. I don't want to be balanced in this spot, but like both of the hands makes a lot of sense to play this way. The only lines where you're going to be unbalanced in the river, basically. Like on the turn, I don't want to get a fold because I want him to call a small bet on the river. And when I bluff, I don't want to get a fold because I'm just gonna jam the river. Probably with pocket 9s, you have a bit more incentive to like raise a bit bigger. Now, I'm gonna raise a little bit bigger actually with pocket 9s. I'm gonna raise 1000.
River's a 3.
I'll size 800 800.
800, okay. With value here, this is maybe one of the only points I kind of disagree with Yolan here. I think I would probably just lead myself very, very large. I guess the downside of kind of just leading very, very big is we lose value against hands like King, Queen of Diamonds that just would have stabbed, or a hand like 9x that would just always call the block bet. But I think those hands are a smaller portion of his range than hands just like Ace King, Ace Queen, Ace Jack. And those hands, even for a massive overbet here, are just never going to fold. So I always like to talk about the way to minimize fold equity is just bet ourselves. The way to maximize fold equity is actually to go for a check raise. And so when we have a very strong value hand here, I just like to lead ourselves very, very large on this turn. I think going smaller than 2x pot would be a massive blunder because I don't think a hand like Ace King or Ace Queen is ever folding to one bet. They checked back the flop. They've made top pair. They're not folding unless we check raise and jam the river, right? So I would just go bet the turn and then I choose a reasonable size on the river, but also agree with a lot of the reasons behind Yolan's strategy. Like I think the block 3-bet definitely has merit, but I think just so much of his range is going to be Ace X here. We maximize value against that portion of his range by just going big bet in this node. All right, next hand here, we're going to open on the button with pocket deuces to $60. Why did I call them ducks? Big blind's going to call. We flop bottom set. He checks it over to us. Let me know your thoughts going through this hand, starting from the flop. Let's hear it.
So it's damn hard to fold pair on the flop. It's damn hard to fold like top pair, especially kind of for any size. We have a ton of bluffs available. Also happens to function well in theory, sort of just for all the reasons I'm saying. I'm going to be going for like a big overbet with value. 180. I don't want to like get 8x to think about folding too hard.
So we go 180 and villain is going to call. Turn is a 4 and villain checks at this point.
Yeah, so same idea. Top pair and stuff is still calling. Got a ton of draws available. We're very deep, so we do have incentive to try to get all the marbles. Gonna be overbetting again, just call it 750.
750 and villain is going to call. Very interesting river. It is a 9, pairing the top card, and villain checks it over to us once more here on this river.
Yeah, just the dream too. I mean, we have so many perceived bluffs in range with Jack 10, Queen Jack, if they are even thinking about that sort of thing, and if they have a 9, they're never folding. They might even call an 8 at this point if we have some sort of aggressive image, so yeah, we're just ripping it in.
All in?
All in. Yeah, I don't see any other option.
All right, same exact spot, except this time we've got 10-7 of hearts, and we flop a straight flush draw. Big combo draw here on the flop. Walk me through what you're thinking.
Yeah, so sort of the inverse. Comparing it to the first hand, we're doing like a lot more polarizing on the turn. Like if we have the big size option. I would actually just like to go small here. If we start going bigger, a lot of stronger flush draws could still be calling anyway, and we're kind of owning ourselves. We are getting stuff like pocket 6s, pocket 4s to fold more often. Might just go 40 here and go from there.
He is going to call, and the turn is a 4 once again. Checks it over. Pot is 210 now. What are you thinking?
They've got a wider range. There's still a lot to charge and deny. I would like them to start folding 8x and stuff. So now at this point, I'm leaning towards an overbet, going something like 300 here, and just expecting more folds because their range is wider because we went smaller on the previous street.
So we go 300. He is going to call, and we get to a river now, which guess what the river is?
9.
There we go.
Yeah,
it's a 9.
I got this. I can see the future, man.
What are you thinking on this this 9 here? How you feeling?
I'm thinking. In this particular case, I just give up. I'm just going to be checking. At this point, with the overbet, the range is pretty defined. 9x isn't folding. I would need to be really sure they're going to have a lot of 8x or wider hands and be folding them, and I just don't see it.
So once again, Darius playing his bluffs and his value very, very differently here, which I can get completely on board with. The one thing I may change in this hand with the 10-7 of hearts here, getting to the river, I do think villain's going to have a lot of hands like Ace X of hearts, Jack 10, King X of hearts, Queen X of hearts, etc. And all these hands, if we just go check on the river, we lose to all of this stuff, which is kind of a disaster with 10 high. Now, of course, villain's just going to have a ton of 9x here. But I think the really cool thing is we can just go very, very small on this river. We can just breathe on this pot, maybe 200, maybe even 150. Get villain to fold his Jack high, Queen high, King high, Ace high on this river. And if that is the case, then our bluff might just be printing. So even with a bad combo, I may still bluff very small on this river just to clean out his kind of draws that missed that have better showdown value than our 10 high. All right, so in this one, the button, a reg actually is going to open, and this is a solid reg. He's winning a 1020, probably not beating like 1K NL online, but he is good enough to beat a 1020 game. So he opens to 60, and we are going to defend in the big blind with pocket 4s. The flop is going to come Queen 8-4, pretty good for us. We flop bottom set here. Going to check it over to the pre-flop raiser. He's going to go 50. Gethen, walk me through what you're thinking in this spot.
Queen 8-4 is just a really deceptive board in terms of there's so many hands to pull bluffs from. So this feels like a spot where people often perceive me to be over bluffing. I've got so many 10-9s, 5-6s, just so many gut shots, so many flush draws to pick from. I'm really excited. Obviously, bottom set, one of the best value hands. I think I'm going to start building a pot right now. Obviously, we're really deep. The SPR is really high. I'm check raising pretty large here. I think when someone bets 50, they are range betting. There's going to be a lot of hands that are just folding whatever size I check raise, and a lot of hands are going to perceive me to be over bluffing. I think I'm probably going somewhere around 400.
Okay, so we go 400. He calls. Turn is a 5.
Look at that sweet baby there. Obviously, that does bring in a couple of my gut shots, but I still think this is a spot that is easily perceived to be over bluffed. Obviously, I have a very strong hand. I'm looking to play for stacks. I want to set up a less than 1 river SPR. I think betting somewhere around 1,000, especially in live poker where low friction bet sizes tend to perform pretty well. I think 1K on the turn here, targeting Queen X draws, just trying to get a less than 1 river SPR.
And he calls, and the river is pretty good for you.
Oh no, I'm now losing to Queen 8. I think I just have to check fold. No, this is a really great card, reducing the number of perceived combos of value that I can have in this situation. I think a lot of people would likely be over bluffing in this situation. I think any reg who's worth his salt at 1020 has seen this spot fair number of times, can just count all of the 10-9s, all of the Jack 9, all of the missed heart draws I get to here. I think this is a spot where I made a plan on the turn, I've set up a river SPR, I'm just putting the money in.
There you go.
I lost. He snap called. He has Queen 8. Oh my god, I overplayed it.
All right, this hand we are playing against a reg or a pro, not a trying rec. With 6-4 of hearts, we flop bottom pair and a flush draw. We check it over. He bets 50. Walk me through what you're thinking.
I've ruled out folding. I think this is a hand that obviously has some showdown. I would say when I see a $50 bet from a button open, I'm expecting this to very likely be close to a range bet, which means that I'm ahead of a decent portion of that range. Obviously, there is some arguments for a check raise. I think I would mostly play check call. With this amount of showdown, I know I'm going to get to see a river pretty much whatever. I think I'm just playing call.
Turn is an offsuit 5. We check it over, and now here on the turn, he double barrels for 150 American doll hairs.
Okay, when a reg's double barreling here, I think the showdown of my hand is diminishing. I don't think it's non-existent, but I think that when I see 150 on this turn, I'm expecting to see more made hands than obvious bluffs. I think if I want to maximize fold equity, turn check raises tend to perform very, very well. We're pretty deep in this hand. Check raise here with this much extra backup equity feels very, very tempting. Check call can't be bad. Think I'm in camp check raise. I think this is going to put a lot of pressure on hands as strong as ace queen. If we go for a turn check raise, there's going to be some disguised rivers where I'm going to hit my hand. I think I'm not going absurdly large against a reg here. I think I do kind of want them to call turn and have more options on the river. I think I'm probably going somewhere around 600. Hit my hand.
The river is an 8.
Yes. I've made a full house. That is a uncomfortable river, obviously. I think against regs, they're going to recognize that this may be reducing some combos of value in my range. I don't think it's the worst card. I would not expect them to be double barreling much 8x. I think obviously there's going to be a brick walls that I can run into. One of the concepts that I think about versus regs is if you do want to bluff a reg, make them play for all the money. And I think that in this line, having check called flop, check raise turn, and now a big bet on the river, for whatever reason, the pattern monkey abilities of live players, which tends to be pretty good, this line is far less likely to be bluffed than the line where you check raise the flop, bet the turn, and bet the river. This one feels like a spot where I'm expecting this to not work a ton of the time, but I think enough. I think in this situation I have very little showdown value. I think I'm going to put the money in, although I am not loving it, and those chips are going to feel a little heavy in my hand.
All in. We see here Gethen check calling on the flop, check raising on the turn, absolutely maximizes fold equity against thinking players. And we see here Gethen, even though he got a poor river, just figuring here that when he check raises the turn, he's just going to have so much fold equity that it may not matter here. It can probably get fill into fold hands like Queen X and overpairs here, specifically when he leaves behind 2x pot. So taking a very different line here when he has a bluff than when he has value. When he has value, just check raising the flop, betting the turn, betting the river. And when he has a bluff here, check raising the turn instead of check raising the flop. We're actually playing against a pro or a reg in this hand. Not going to be like a top crusher, just like an okay 10-20 reg. Definitely beating the game, but probably not winning online at like 1K NL or something. So not like a top boss reg, but good enough to win in live poker. So definitely thinking, definitely somewhat competent. He's going to open on the button to 60. We're going to defend in the big blind with queen 9 of clubs. Flop comes jack 10-3, so we flop open-ended. We're going to check it over to the pre-flop raiser. Now he's going to go $50. Decision is on us, so give me your thoughts, what you're thinking in this spot.
I will prefer to call this type of hands and just raise all the hands, simply because I believe I have more value to raise hands that like seems a bit more unconventional, simply because when I raise and like there is an 8 or there's a king, will often see me on queen 9, so I assume that the EV in the check raising line will be a bit lower because he will always see me on having this hands basically. And also his sizing is pretty weak, so when you see this type of sizing, so I'm often gonna check the turn, and I know I'm gonna have massive fold equity on the river when it goes check, no matter the run out basically.
Turn, offsuit 5.
In the case we assume he doesn't have like pocket 3, pocket 10s, jack 10, and you remove the check raising region, it's not gonna cost you much if he doesn't have this type of hands, then leading start to make sense and the solvers start to lead. The reason why I think it's interesting to think about this line, I'm not gonna say you should pull lead here in the spots without studying the spot. When you lead, they're gonna apply extremely straightforward. So you're gonna raise the stronger hands, you're gonna call the weaker hands. When you bet 50, he calls and you just like bet 3 for X spot on a blank. He's just mostly gonna fold because he doesn't know the line.
Okay, so with all that being said, you checking or leading?
I'm gonna check the turn here.
We check, and now he goes 150 here. What are you thinking?
I think I will tend to check raise here. The main reason is because I expect pocket 10s, pocket jacks, pocket 3s to just like bet bigger flop or turns. I think they're just gonna overbet or at least pot with all the draws available. So I will assume his range is a bit weaker, more toward the ace, 10, king jack, queen jack side. I'm gonna raise 725 here.
725, and he is going to call. So the river is an offsuit deuce. What are you thinking?
I think my size will also in this hand depends on his timing. Because for example, someone that tanks a lot in call, he doesn't have the same hands as if he calls a bit fast. For example, most draws has like a backup, like king 9, queen 9, king queen, ace queen of diamonds. Many diamonds hands are going to call very fast against the race because they are not going to free bet all in. So if he tends to call faster, I will just tend to think his range is a bit weaker, and I will tend to just fire. But so basically I bet all the time, but I'm not doing the same size, and I think his range is a little bit different. If he tanks a lot and call, it's actually a good sign. Like he might have a hand that he's thinking about free betting, but we need to remember that his sizings are a bit weaker, and we have enough certainty that he doesn't have the very strong region. So when he tanks call, I will assume his range is also a little bit weaker, but not very much on the diamond side. So actually, if there is a diamond, he tanks a lot here, I will tend to bluff my hands. And if he calls too fast, I'm probably gonna give up here.
45 seconds to a minute, and then calls on the turn.
Okay, it's mostly gonna have a close hand between call and fold on the turn, because there are simply less hands that are going to be close between call and raise, especially playing with this size. So I think it's someone that was a bit more scared about me potentially betting the river, but he still decided to call. And so this type of people, this population, I think we will fold way more against a bet. And people that will call way more light in this spot are probably people that see on too much bluff and that are confident that calling the turn is good. So when people tank, it's in general a good sign. And I will just go for a very big sizing here. And on the deuce, okay, I think I will just jam here. So basically in this spot, when I'm not sure between 2K or jam, from all the hands I review from online and lives, when I'm not sure in the spots between two sizing on a bluff, often the best size is the bigger one. So when I'm not sure between two sizes, I'm always going to take the bigger one. And here, I'm not sure. So I'm not sure. I take what I think is the most conservative option. So I just go all in here.
All right, now same exact spot, playing against a reg on the button, except this time we have jack 10 in the big blind here. We're going to defend once again. We check it over, and once again, he bets $50. Walk me through what you're thinking.
Probably sizing around 500, 550 is a bit better. It will polarize our range a lot, and we mainly have pocket freeze jack 10, and we have so many draws available that I actually don't see him starting to fold hands he should fold, because if he has a jack here like jack 7, should not call against like an X raise. So I would just tend to raise bigger here and then raise around 450.
450?
450.
And he is going to call, going to a turn, which is an offsuit 5. Now what are you thinking?
Better sizing, so I get sure to get called by the region I dominate, like aces, for example. So I will just bet here around 1000 here. So the ace pair is below 1, and it's gonna be easier to get called on the river. So I'm betting 1000 here.
We go 1000, and he thinks for a bit and calls river, which is an offsuit deuce. Give me your thoughts.
I think with his sizing on the flop, I will assume often people are a bit weaker, but considering he called both the check raise and the turn call, we assume his range is probably a bit weaker than what I think. He's mostly gonna have a jack or 10 here, mostly a jack. So I will tend to size a way that let him think he has 2 good pot odds to fold. So I'm not gonna take the risk to jam, simply because if you jam in these spots when you don't have the absolute nuts of very, very strong hands that has like more than 85% equity, the problem in these spots is getting called by nothing is very, very bad. So even if these scenarios are going to happen not that much, I will tend to be very careful here about going too big with a hand like Jack 10. I'll do around 1300.
I think Yolan took the exact same line I would take in both of these hands, which is pretty cool. Notice he went for the check call on the flop and then the check raise on the turn when he had kind of a semi bluff. And this is because I found kind of these delayed gratification lines against regs or kind of thinking players work better than just check raising the flop and just going bet, bet, bet. In those lines, I think they kind of tend to get a little bit more sticky. The cool part about check calling the flop and check raising the turn is this line is just so massively under bluffed in live poker. If you're playing against an aware player, they're just going to give you credit a lot more for check calling the flop and check raising the turn than they would if you check raise the flop and then just go bet, bet. So I think this line is super cool to check raise the turn and then jam the river. I think this just gets through quite a bit here. And then we see Yolan played exactly the opposite when he had value, takes this huge size on the flop because he correctly, I think, deduces that villains are going to kind of put you on too many bluffs here when you check raise the flop as opposed to the turn. And then he's just going to put in a ton of money here across the turn and the river. I might have gotten a bit more greedy on this river and just tried to put the money in. I really like how Yolan decided to check raise the turn when he had a bluff and check raise the flop when he had value. All right, next hand here. The cutoff opens to 60. We 3-bet on the button with pocket 10s. Cutoff calls. Flop comes 10-5-3. Pretty good for us. Flopping top set here. He checks it over. Walk me through what you're thinking, starting from right here.
Well, there's a flush draw out there, and I hate getting cooled, so I rip it in. Now, just my gut's just saying like half pot is like an appropriate standard. Like we really could bet any size, but I think half pot's gonna have like the flush draws still generally calling and not filled out the lower pocket pairs. So I'll just go half pot here, 220.
Turn is a king, and he checks it over.
It's a little bit unfortunate just because a lot of hands, like a low run out would be better because this pocket pair is just gonna be more tempted to call. So I am expecting bluffs to overperform now. So the smaller we go, the more they're gonna raise and the more likely they may just stick around. Since we have 2 10s, they don't have a lot of second pair. Like something like a 10, I would think would just probably very likely call a half pot bet again. They can still have all of the flush draws and stuff. It's still possible they have a set, but less likely. Other option is just go like really big and hope they get sticky with a flush draw. Yeah, I'm leaning just to like 280 sort of sizing, then induce some raises from those flush draws, still keep them calling on the king specifically.
Okay, so river's an ace, and now the opponent checks.
We are very close to the effective nuts, not expecting them to be raising like thin for value. When that much goes in, people just get pretty nitty. Obviously, we can have queen jack in range, like that's obvious. So if they did have something like 2 pair, they're not going to be ripping it. Are they going to be out of fold though? I doubt it. So probably just ripping it in. I think ace 5, ace 3 of diamonds, ace king off, which we're actually going to have here a lot. People just don't like 4-betting very often. Instinct is just put as much as I think those 2 pair are calling in. Yeah, generally ripping is just worth so much more. You want to focus on upside when you have a nutted hand. It's just almost no exceptions. I'm inclined to just be jamming.
So all in 3.3K. All right, now exact same spot, except we've got 9-8 of diamonds. Once again, we 3-bet the cutoffs open. Flop comes 10-5-3 with a couple diamonds. He checks it over. Walk me through what you're thinking going forward.
Same size function's fine. I think going smaller is also just totally fine. We didn't go a quarter pot. I'd probably go like 140 here.
Why would you be thinking about going smaller?
Smaller they go, the wider they call, and I don't think they raise that much more, so it just sets them up to like overfold, turn, and river more often.
So we go 140, and villain is going to call. Turn is a king, and villain checks it over to us again here. What are you thinking?
I think they're going to be overfolding to any size. Life sort of just sucks for them. This is our card. Going to be down betting something like 280. Keep their range wide enough that we can keep targeting it on rivers. Almost like value bluffing at this point. Trying to keep in 10x, some mix of like pocket pairs, just random 5x, 3x they have, flush draws, ace queen, ace jack.
So we are going to go 280, villain calls. calls. You're going to be shocked by this river, but it is an ace. And villain checks here on this river. What are you thinking here?
Their range is still like plenty wide. Like they can still have plenty of gut shots and stuff that hit, but I think they do still have tons of 10x. They could have a king, like king queen backdoor now and then, still like lower pocket pairs and things of that nature. I think we can get a pretty good price in our bluff against like second pair and worse. I think half pot actually functions like just fine. I'd probably go like 640 something.
Once again, we see Darius playing his bluffs and his value very, very differently. In this pocket tens hand here, I may consider a slightly different size on the turn. Darius chose to go small on this turn, trying to keep in hands like pocket nines, pocket eights, gut shots, etc. I may actually just size up on this turn, just because unless we go very, very, very small, when the king comes on the turn, 3-bet pot, we bet on the flop, we're gonna barrel on the turn. I think villains are folding hands like 8s, 9s, 7s all the time, unless we go like 15% pot or something ridiculous. And when we have 2 10s in our hand, gonna make it very, very unlikely that villain has a hand like ace 10 or queen 10 or jack 10 or something that will continue to small bet. So I actually just like going big on this turn. I don't think villains folding hands like ace x of diamonds. I think they're gonna have ace king almost pure in live poker, where they just don't 4-bet this hand from out of position after we 3-bet all that much. And so let's target the ace king. Let's target the ace x of diamonds. I just don't think those hands are folding. So I would probably just go big on this turn to make sure we have a nice SPR on the river where we can just always get the money in against ace x of diamonds here. And with the 9-8 of diamonds here, like Darius's line, going small here on this turn. I think going small on the turn when we don't have pocket tens is pretty cool. Trying to keep in that 10x, trying to keep in ace queen with the ace of diamonds, all that type of stuff that's just gonna fold on the river. The only thing I quibble with is the sizing here. Darius went 280. I might go a little bit smaller here, maybe 150, just making sure the gut shots and the 10x don't fold here on the turn. I do think players are going to massively overfold a king x turn in a 3-bet pot after we have 3-bet, c-bet the flop, and double barrel the turn. So I just want to make sure they have that wide, weak range getting to the river. Then when the river is an ace, I made sure that 10x stayed in on the turn. Now I'm just going to choose the size that gets hands like queen 10, jack 10, 10, 9 to fold, which I think is going to be relatively small. All right, once again, playing against a pro or a reg in this hand, going to be a winner at the 10-20 blind level, probably not a top level crusher, but definitely beating the game. So the cutoff is actually going to open to 60. Button, the pro, is going to 3-bet here. We're going to cold 4-bet in the big blind with pocket kigglies, and the button is going to call. Flop comes 7-5 deuce. Walk me through your thoughts from this point forward.
Well, I'm thinking I've got $3,400 back and the pot is $1,270, and I'm thinking, is this a spot for a 3-street game or a 2-street game? And how do I minimize fold equity? How do I shape and sculpt SPR? With kings, obviously I am looking to minimize fold equity against a portion of range, queens, jacks, 10s, possibly even 9s. I think it's pretty tempting to size up here. A lot of the time in 4-bet pots, it's hard to go too wrong with quarter. I think I might go like 800. I think that's gonna let a less than 1 turn SPR, giving me opportunities just to play a 2-street game. It feels like on these dynamic textures that I really wanna make sure that 10s, jacks call, and I think regs make pretty bad calling mistakes in these tight configurations where they just can't fold an overpair to save their life. Let's get in $800.
We go 800. He calls. Turn is a 7, bringing him back.
He could have 3 7s in his 3-bet call of our 4-bet range. This is bad news. Was that not good hand reading? Did I get that wrong?
That was great. Yeah. That was great. It's almost like you're reading the comments section.
Obviously a blank turn. I do think there's 2 pretty close options in this situation. Like, I'm trying to ask myself what happens if, right? I'm trying to step out of just the, hey, I had a plan, let's follow through, and ask, well, what happens if I bet really small? What happens if I put all the money in? Well, the plan on the flop was to sculpt to play a 2-street game, but I still think on a 7, there is a reasonable argument for sizing way down and trying to make this the 3-street installment plan. Against a reg, I think I'm probably not going to overcomplicate it. I think I'm probably just putting the money in. I think a lot of regs here are willing to call down with a hand like queens and a hand like jacks. And I think they sometimes forget that that is the vast majority of their range in this spot here. And that folding 10s here is not folding a monster. It's in fact folding probably bottom 30th, bottom 20th percentile of your range. Let's keep things simple. Let's follow through with the plan we made on the flop.
We go all in for 2,600. All right, same exact spot, except we have ace queen of hearts here. Getting to this flop, walk me through what you are thinking.
Okay, we have an SPR of just under 3. I think this would be a spot where I'm looking to do my best to maximize fold equity against hands like tens, jacks, maybe even queens by the river. I think I'd start here with a very small bet, trying to keep in hands like ace queen, ace king in our opponent's range. I think something like 300, maybe even 250 is a pretty good starting point. Let's start with 300 on the flop and evaluate. I would expect him to be calling too wide, too much of his range versus this small bet. We pick up some nice equity on the turn, probably sizing down again here. Portions of his range like ace king that I suspect will fold now, and I think I have a pretty good chance against hands like tens and jacks if I pick maybe 500 on the turn to call again. I always try and remind myself about the best bluff being they call twice and then fold on the river. Really would like to see a heart on the river so that I can actually get some value, but Marc's a real piece of work, and I suspect it won't be.
Good news for you, actually. Ooh. The river is a 9.
Ah, you piece of... We don't have any showdown. I think too often in 4-bet pots, people like to pretend ace high is going to have some showdown. Obviously in this line, it doesn't. We can run into some rivered full houses, potentially. I am uncomfortable, but I didn't come to the casino not to fight for every pot. Betting small makes absolutely no sense. I think check just allows him to show down too many hands. Just if I'm gonna be bluffing a reg, I'm gonna try and make them play for all the money. And I think this is a spot here where I'm telling them 3 times that their hand is no good and that I am sitting there with old pocket kigglies. I think I'm just all in.
2,600. All right, finally, let's change the river and say it's actually an ace of clubs now. How are you thinking about this river differently?
This is an interesting spot here on the river. When we have ace queen of hearts, I think we reduce a ton of potential ace kings I would have got here. I think we have the best hand almost always. I think this river makes bluffing extremely challenging. I think against a reg, even your average 5-10 or 10-20 reg, that this is going to be a spot where we are going to be perceived to be under bluffing. So my value size needs to be very small, I think, here. I think if I'm looking to target a hand like jacks, maybe a hand like queens, I think I might even be able to do something pretty fun, like bet 10% pot. There's something in the idea of betting like 300 on the river, maybe challenging their ego and manhood just a little bit. Something like 250 to 300 feels like a pretty interesting idea to squeak out a little bit of value and sometimes give yourself a pretty interesting option to bet call against someone who maybe thinks you're betting kings, maybe thinks you're betting something worse than ace king or ace queen and does something foolish with jacks or 10. I think the 10% to induce / squeak out a little bit of value from a hand like jacks or queens feels pretty tempting.
So we see here Gethen trying to play the 2-street game when he has pocket kings, just going big bet on the flop, targeting the jacks, queens, tens, etc. that just are going to overcall on this flop or a big size. Like regs just aren't folding pocket 9s or pocket 10s here, even though to the size they should be at some frequency in a cold 4-bet pot here. And just taking the big size on the turn again, figuring playing a 2-street game is going to look a little bit more bluffy. It's going to minimize fold equity against regs here and just trying to get in the money against a hand like queens or jacks. And then when he has ace queen here, going for the small bet on the flop, making sure villain calls with a hand like ace king, keeping that in, going small on the turn, want to drag along hands like pocket 10s, pocket 9s, etc. here, and then getting to the river, Gethen now goes for the triple barrel, which he figures looks much stronger here than just going for 2 streets, and figuring has quite a bit of additional fold equity here against hands like jacks, 10s, queens, when he goes bet, rather than just going big bet flop, big bet turn. This bet line actually going to increase fold equity over just betting big flop and then jamming turn. All right, so the big picture takeaway for me here, I'm kind of picturing the midwit meme where the beginner is just like, what do my 2 cards want to do? The guy in the middle, the 100 IQ, the midwit guy, is just so lost with what is equilibrium? How do I be balanced here? Do I unblock my opponents calling blah, 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 blah? And we get to the top, the super high IQ, the high stakes pros. And once again, they're just asking, what do my 2 cards want to do? Hopefully this video shows in poker, even at mid and high stakes, you probably should not be playing your bluffs and value in the same way. Hope this turns you into the biggest boy possible. Thank you guys and have a gentle day.